Hello, my name is Nick Mann and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Yellow Rattle. Yellow Rattle is a very unusual plant. It's unusual because it parasitizes meadow grasses. That makes it really invaluable in terms of meadow creation. I know lots of meadows that don't have it, but generally speaking, it's a really good thing to have if you want to establish a wildflower meadow in, for example, your back garden. You can see its effect here. It doesn't make the grass look less healthy, but just enfeebles it. So in this area where it's well established, you can see the grass has only grown to kind of 6 inches, something like that. Whereas behind me, where you can't see the rattle, it's really considerably longer, up to sort of 2 or 3 feet. This is important when you're establishing a new meadow because you're able to give the wildflowers there more space to get established, and consequently you'll end up with more floral diversity. We think there are at least 6 subspecies of rattle across the UK. It used to be a very widespread plant and very common, but obviously farmers don't like it because it significantly reduced hay crops, so they mowed it out. Because it's an annual, which is unusual for meadow wildflower, where most species are perennials, because it's an annual and the seed has very short-term viability, it means it's very easy to get rid of if you don't want it. So if you want to establish yellow rattle, the easiest way to do it is actually through seed. You can buy plug plants commercially, but obviously because they have to be associated with grass, they're expensive, and if you're trying to cover anything other than a very small area, then it does get a very expensive proposition. The seed itself is, or can be, notoriously difficult. It needs to be fresh as the first point. It does have very short viability, so it needs to have been harvested from the current season. The second issue is with the processing of it. You need to buy your seed from a reputable seed merchant because it does need to be carefully processed. The seeds are very fine discs, they're wind-borne, and any damage to them is going to result in a fall in germination rates. So once you've bought your seed, which will typically be July or August, there's a window to seed which runs from that time until the end of December. Rattle needs to experience a sustained period of cold to trigger germination, so it's important that it's sown in that window. Once the seedlings get going, which is going to be early March, do remember not to mow, because obviously if you knock the heads off, then that's the end of your rattle. When you sow, there's a certain amount of preparation involved. You need to cut the grass extremely short, perhaps scalp it, and possibly scarify it or chain harrow it on a larger scale. You want to be able to see a lot of earth so that the rattle seed falls directly onto the earth. We recommend sowing it up to 1 gram a square metre, which doesn't sound like a lot, but because the seed is expensive, you may end up just sowing some areas. If you have success with it, it will spread naturally. Once you've sown it, then just give it a light roll, or if you're lucky enough to have livestock, then the sheep or cattle's feet will actually just press the seed down into the soil, so that will be helpful too. Yellow rattle has a reputation for being slightly tricky, which in our experience is probably not justified. We've identified the main causes that people have issues with it. The first is that they've not sown it in the right way. Typically the seed has not got good enough contact with the soil, or they've sown it at the wrong time of year. There are also sometimes issues with rattle seed that's been harvested from previous seasons and consequently is no longer viable. And certainly that's a problem if you haven't bought your seed from the right supplier. The biggest issue though is asking the rattle to do too much. If you're looking at an area where soil fertility is relatively high, plus also some aggressive grasses, so cultivars of ryegrass for example, then the Rhinanthus is just not going to work. It's just not going to be robust enough to deal with that kind of environment. We've worked very hard at getting Rhinanthus minor right. Over the years I've worked to find really good quality suppliers from as many different sources as I can around the country. There are at least 6 different subspecies of Rhinanthus in the UK, probably many more, and each one is particularly adapted to a certain soil type, for example, or local conditions. So the more of that we can offer you, the better. We germination test our rattle as well, so we make sure that it's been correctly processed and still has as high germination rate as possible. Typically those germination rates are in the region of around 90–95%, so we can be confident that there's no problem with the seed that we're sending out.